Can you be a better spouse? Absolutely. Find out how.
Now, we are in the middle of discussing, because we're in the days of Sphira, which are days of working on ourselves and refinement and improvement. The last week we said, let's tackle what's really important. Let's learn how to be a better wife, which will also make us a better mother and also a better person and also a better friend and also a better sibling and also a better child. And we discussed that. And I want to continue that discussion. But first, tonight is literally now is the energy of such a special day. I can't not mention it. First, we'll talk a bit about the very, very special energy happening right now in our world. And then we'll continue with all this energy. We got a lot of good things we're going to do. And we're going to continue learning how to be the best wife or best person or best friend or best in relationships person possible. But first, let's do Lag BaOmer tonight. Now, again, Judaism is not like the Gregorian secular calendar where the day starts in the morning. In the Jewish calendar, which is a lunar calendar, the day starts at night. Just like Sabbath, the Shabbos begins Friday night. And every holiday begins the night before, as we would call it. So Lag BaOmer begins like now, when it really becomes night. Now through tomorrow night is this very special day called Lag BaOmer. Now, what does Lag BaOmer mean? Well, Lag is really two Hebrew letters, a Lamed and a Gimel. And Lamed is the numerical value of 30, and Gimel is the numerical value of 3. So Lag is 33. So Lag BaOmer means the 33rd day of the Omer. Now, what's the Omer? Well, the Omer is really the technical way of talking about the Omer count, because we've been counting since the second night of Passover. So now it's the 33rd night of that counting, which is every year the same, the 18th. 18, of course, is the numerical value of the word Chai, life, of the Jewish month of Iyar. So it's the day of life of Iyar. So the whole counting, Iyar, which is a month we're in, very special month, because every single day is a commandment. Every single day is a commandment of counting. Every single day then is a commandment sanctifying time. When you make a blessing on a food, you're sanctifying the food. Make a blessing on the candles, you're sanctifying the candles. When you're counting the nightly Omer count, counting the days, what's the fabric? What are you sanctifying? You're sanctifying time. This is a month where every single day is godly. Every single day is sanctified by the counting. And this is now the 18th. The Chai, the life of that month. So what happened on this day, on the 18th of Iyar, on Lag, the 33rd of the Omer count, that we celebrate. World over, Jews are celebrating tonight and tomorrow. Two special things, each of which you could spend an hour or 5 hours or 10 hours discussing, and we're going to do it all in about 5 minutes. From Passover, many years ago, there was a great teacher of the Jewish people, one of the greatest scholars we ever had, called Rabbi Akiva. He's a whole interesting story in himself. He only started learning Torah when he was 40, and he became ultimately the greatest teacher of Torah the Jews ever had. And literally at 40, he didn't know the ABCs. He didn't know the Hebrew alphabet. He couldn't read. He couldn't write. And he became one of the greatest teachers of Torah we have ever had. Didn't come from a illustrious lineage. Didn't start at a young age. Had a wife that believed in him. And no matter how old you are, you can always learn. So it's a great model for the rest of us. He was actually the teacher of one we more commonly think of associated with this day, Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai. We'll get to that in a second. But Rabbi Akiva had thousands and thousands and thousands of students, 24,000 students. He was the teacher of Torah of the Jewish people in this post the destruction of the Second Temple era, about the 2nd century. And they became, from Passover, suddenly his students started dying and dying and dying. There was a horrible plague that almost wiped out 24,000 students of Torah. We're told there was a plague because they weren't respectful of each other. Obviously, if you have a teacher that teaches, every student is going to understand it a little differently and hear it a little differently and transmit it a little differently. Because just like each one of you afterwards said what you got from tonight, you might each think of something different you got. It resonates differently based on your mind and your heart and your soul and your background. He had 24,000 different instruments resonating his teaching, all a little bit differently. But they so much loved their teacher. Each student, it so bothered him. He felt so disturbed that the other students just weren't understanding it properly, meaning not understanding it. And this was considered such a flaw because these people were so great that a plague almost wiped out all 24,000. And on Lag BaOmer, this day, the 18th of Iyar, the plague was over. So from when the students started dying, it became like a time of mourning. All these beautiful young men are just dying and dying and dying. The whole Jewish people were in mourning. And Lag BaOmer, the mourning stopped. And therefore it became forever a day of rejoicing. And a day where the theme obviously based on this is loving and respecting each other, loving Jews, Jewish unity, Jewish love, Jewish pride. That's one reason why this day is so special. There's a second reason that perhaps is even stronger. As I said, one of the greatest, if not the greatest student of Rabbi Akiva, now in the next generation, the student of Rabbi Akiva, was Rabbi Shimeon Bar is Aramaic to mean the son of. In Hebrew, we'd say Ben Yochai. He was the first one to ever publicly teach mystical aspect of Torah, what we call Kabbalah. If you've heard of the work of the Zohar, which is the fundamental work of Kabbalah, he is the author of the Zohar. He is the greatest Kabbalist of all time. He was a leader of the Jewish people. He was a master of miracles for the Jews, flowing with love of Jews, did so much to help his fellow Jews through his great mystical spiritual powers. And Lag BaOmer, the 18th of Iyar, is the day he passed away. And he said to his students, mark this date as the day of my joy. Now, why is the day of his joy? It's the day of his passing. Well, one reason is because a passing marks the culmination of your life achievements. So if someone didn't have such a great life, then the passing isn't so spectacular. But if someone was a great person, if someone was a person like Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai, whose whole life was just unending chains of love of God and fear of God and sacrificing for God. He lived in a cave for 13 years because of his sacrifice for God. He taught Torah to the Jewish people because of his love of God. He taught his entire generation the mystical dimension of Torah. When someone has a life like that, well, the passing is the culmination of his life achievement. And every year on the passing, meaning right now, tonight and tomorrow, all of his accomplishments are shining in this world in a greater measure than ever before. As we've discussed this concept before, whatever it happens to be that the class is on the passing, as we call it, the yahrzeit, which is the term we use for the passing of someone, or by tzaddik, we use a slightly different term, the stalkus of a tzaddik, of a great, holy, holy, holy Jew. Everything he accomplished his whole life is now accessible to us. It's shining in this world to create salvation. So this always happens on the yahrzeit, on the day marking the anniversary of the passing of a great holy Jew, a tzaddik. But for Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai, it's even more intense. It is literally a day when we say the gates of heaven are open. He said, before he passed away, he's so excited, he's so happy, he's going to his wedding. Meaning he's becoming totally fused with God. So that's why he said, I want everyone to celebrate. It's a great day. It's a happy day. It's a wonderful day. There's no mourning. If someone's sad on my day, he's very disturbed. There's no mourning. And until today, about 250,000 Jews will make the pilgrimage to where he is resting in Meron. Some years it's more than 250,000, but generally, could you imagine someone who passed away in the 2nd century? We're now in the 21st century, 19 centuries ago. And 250,000 people travel to his grave on the day of his passing. It is that spectacular. It is that significant. It is that noteworthy. It's a day of salvation for the Jewish people, especially traditionally with fertility issues. There's many, many miracles with fertility issues from the energy of Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer. But in general, with everything, it's a day of tremendous salvation, of his energy shining and with more intensity every year. So that's why I said I can't skip this. I want to tell you about it. So I'm just going to briefly give over some of the customs of the day, and then we're going to talk about being the best wife possible with all this great special Lag BaOmer energy. So customs: to go outside, enjoy God's beautiful nature, playing with bows and arrows. Bows and arrows is really symbolic of attacking the evil inclination when he's sort of out there at us. No mourning, even though I said otherwise, from Passover and actually all the way for many of us until Shavuos, it's a time of semi-mourning, and there's many things we do not do from post-Passover to Shavuos. But on Lag BaOmer, we have music, we have dancing, we have hair cuttings, we have weddings. It's a traditional time for all the little boys that are 3 years old and didn't get their hair cut from Passover because you couldn't cut hair then to get their haircuts. So we do all that this Lag BaOmer. It's traditional to make bonfires because the fire symbolizes like the fire of his mystical teachings. It's traditional to eat carob, though we checked out 3 produce stores today and couldn't find carob in any of them because it says in the 13 years that he was in the cave, he survived on a carob tree that grew outside the cave. Colored eggs. We boil eggs usually in like onion skins to color them, which is sort of like the egg is a symbol of mourning. Like we said, this is the time of the mourning for the 24,000 students, but they're colored, it's lifted. The note's changing because this is when they stop dying. Starting in the 1950s, the Lobster Rebbe encouraged parades, children's parades, expressing Jewish unity, Jewish love, Jewish pride. The Rebbe says that Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai comes to each parade, wherever it is, all over the world. So I generally try to make sure I'm at a parade because if he's there, I want to be there too. We give charity in denominations of 18, like today is tonight and tomorrow is the 18th of ER. We say chapter 33 in Psalms, like it's Lag again is the numerical value 33 of the Omer counting. And we try to tap into any of the day and pray for our salvation. It's the day when heaven's gates are wide open and we want to take advantage. So that is a very little bit about this very special day, but I definitely wanted to make sure we shared something so we all can know about it and one way or another tap into the great Lag BaOmer energy. We are going to continue because at first I was like, no, we're in the middle of a topic and I'm like, I'm going to skip Lag BaOmer. I'm like, well, if I spend the whole day on Lag BaOmer, we're going to get derailed from our topic. So this was my compromise with myself, the best way I could handle it. Now we are going to resume what we were discussing, which was, this is a time, as we just mentioned, of the sphere count. And the sphere of count is, of course, counting. And that's why we're sanctifying time and we're counting the time. And it's a time that we work on ourselves. And therefore, it's a great time to work on ourselves, becoming better people, better relationships in general, and better wives. So last week, we spoke at length about the idea of working on mind over emotion. And we had a lot of great input, basically everything with the same underpinning. I have a choice. And just indulging in negative emotions and pity parties and sulking is a bad choice. We said you could be the king, the fool, or a nothing. And the king is one's mind over one's heart. Had a lot of great ideas. People spoke about the idea of that love bank of good to remember when someone is making some withdrawals based on what they're doing. Anger being idolatry, not wanting to be an idolater. Thinking of people that have less than us, which sort of shrinks our problems. Whatever happens is what it's meant to be. It's God's will. God knows what's best for me. Understanding we always have a choice to be positive and happy or upset and emotional. And why should we choose to be upset? And the general thought that what we think again and again and again is going to be our go-to. So we want, when we're calm and centered, and to be philosophical and dispassionate, to think any or all of these thoughts many, many, many times to make new inroads, new roads in our brain. So when we're upset and it's a little hard to have discipline, we can still go to those roads. That they'll be natural to us because we developed those roads already so many times. So we discussed that at length last week. That was sort of a brief recap. Anyone have something to share about this past week? Did anyone remember? I'm sure you all remembered. Do something different, look at something differently because of it.
My family was on the best behavior, didn't give me a chance to practice.
That's a great response. Wow. God knew you were all revved up. So he made sure everybody was so good. So you just had no opportunity to flex your beautiful muscles because they just all behaved so well. But when everyone's on good behavior, they're all behaving themselves so nicely, that's a great time to practice. It's a great time to think the thoughts and think the thoughts. So when they start misbehaving, you can go there. It'll be natural. But that's a wonderful answer, Rivka. Amen. It should continue. Anyone else? Anyone else had something that carried over from last week's class? I'm sure things carried over, but that you can remember a week later?
Yeah. Probably feeling more grateful and looking for the details that you can like give praises to, looking for the small details, small gestures, and just say thank you, the opportunity to be grateful and say thank you.
That's great. That's a very practical application. And I like how Menucha phrased it, because sometimes, there's a broad strokes of life, but when we really focus on the details and say, wow, God was so kind in this, and this worked out, or this person was so nice that they did that, and this also worked out. And then because it's sort of like the news, the news always seems to magnify and glorify anything negative. Never turn on the news. It's like the saddest station on TV, the most depressing station, because it's just like glorifying the negative. Well, unfortunately, a lot of our brains do that too. And there could be all this good stuff going on, but our brains are like a go-to to the problem, the downside, the negative. And it really takes discipline and training, believe it or not, for us to notice and appreciate the good. And then it shifts our brains because we're like, wait, life is good. I had this actually literally on Friday. There's a lot of stuff going on Friday. But in the end, a number of things worked out. And here it was very close to Sabbath. And I'm sort of feeling very wrung out and drained from everything I was going through Friday. And I'm like, wait, stop. It was good. This worked out, this worked out, this worked out. And I just wrote it all down in my thank you God book and then repeated the litany a few times to rewire myself. No, it's good. It's not bad. It's good. Look at all the things you can celebrate. Because sometimes even if there's all these things, we sort of are like, oh, I'm supposed to be stressed and drained now, right? Yeah. No, it's good. Focus on the good. Really, the last point we discussed last week, that we often can get pulled down into, you said this, so I say this, and then you say this, and then I say this, and that very sad ping pong game. And I'll say, just say, when you fight with someone who's dirty, you're dirty. When you focus on the negative, you get pulled down. Focus on the good, adding good. And that was really the last point we were saying. And a very central point for everything we want to continue discussing is just this real appreciation for the value of good, the value of positivity, the value of adding in light instead of dealing with darkness. As we said, the redemption's coming. When the redemption comes, the bad's gone. What's left? The good. So how good is our good? Adding in our good, focusing in our good, appreciating good in ourselves and in all the people in our world. And of course, especially, we're talking about our husbands. And there's a lot in that relationship with our husbands that is so shifted if we can notice the good. And as Menucha is saying, the little good, the little details, and appreciate the little details. We want to appreciate the little details in what God's doing for us all day long. And we want to appreciate the little details in what our spouse does for us, which maybe goes back to, I'm going to share little vignette that happened with Lubavitcher Rebbe when he once was defining for someone the concept of love. What does love mean? What does love mean between a husband and a wife? So this was with a woman I know. Her name is Hannah Sharfstein. She is the mother of someone that I was friends with many years ago. I went to school with her, so I had the opportunity many times to be at her house and talk to her. A very dynamic woman with a lot to say, a lot of interesting stories in her life, and she had a very close personal relationship with Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when she was in the stage of her life when she was going out, she was single and, looking to get married. She kept going out with men and saying no, going out with men and saying no. And once she had a personal audience with the Rebbe. Asked her, about this area in her life, going out, getting married, and she said, yes, I'm dating. And the Rebbe asked her about a specific man in this Chabad community that she was in New York, about a specific man, maybe he'd be appropriate. And she said, yeah, I met him, he's very fine, but not for me. She thinks, that's interesting, the Rebbe thought of him, I went out with him. And then the Rebbe mentioned a second person, and a third person, and a fourth person, and a fifth person, all of these people that she had gone out with, and all these people that she had said no to. And she's saying to each one of them, yeah, I went out, and he's a nice guy, and not for me. So the Rebbe was sort of making a point, you keep going out with all these nice guys that are not for you, maybe something in your head has to shift. So the Rebbe then spoke to her about the idea of love. How did the Rebbe speak about love? The Rebbe said to her, I know you like to read. She had already told the Rebbe previously that she was an avid reader. And she said, yes, I do. I really enjoy reading. And he said, what type of books do you like to read? And she said, novels. And the Rebbe said, well, novel is in the category of fiction, right? And fiction means it's not true, right? It's not real. It's make-believe. So whatever you read in novels is make-believe. It's not real life. In a novel, two people meet and have this blinding, stormy, passion, love. That's make-believe. That's not what happens in real life. That's not what people need. That's not real life. It's not how it works. Obviously, the Rebbe didn't say all of these words. I'm elaborating what he said to bring out the point. The Rebbe said love begins when two people meet and there's a thread of understanding between the people. And that thread of understanding is like a tiny, tiny flame. And then they decide to build a life together. And everyday activities of life, caring, sharing, committing to each other, going through the trials and tribulations of life, this flame grows and grows. It grows brighter and stronger and becomes this huge fire until it's so strong that these two people that started off as two strangers have become so intertwined that neither can think of life without the other. What I said just now was almost verbatim, word for word, how the Rebbe said it to her. The Rebbe said, that's what true love is all about. The small acts on the daily basis that take a you and an I and make it us. So I wanted to share this because I think it's such a great focus to build a marriage, meaning she was trying to find the person to build a marriage with. But if you have him, it's good to refocus with this definition of love, with this understanding on the small acts of caring, of sharing, of commitment, meaning of adding in good. Those are marriage building. And that's the general overarching perspective. Now, I'd like to give 5 specific ways to develop this positivity, this focus on good in your relationships. Now, of course, as I'm saying, this doesn't only apply to your marriage because all human relationships probably have the same dynamics, more or less, some a bit more and some a bit less. So that these concepts really you could apply in any arena. And you might say, oh, my marriage doesn't need it, but my relationship with my mother, or relationship with my child, or relationship with my sister, that's where I'm going to use these. So use them wherever it's appropriate, because as we said, we are in the days of Sfiras HaOmer, the days from Passover until Shavuos. Shavuos is in about 2 weeks, where we're working on our character. Now, again, you can work and should work on your character every day of your life. But these are the most auspicious days to work on our character. These are the days when the energy in the world is helping and accelerating our efforts. So if we're going to take the time now to, as Menucha said, focus on the small acts of goodness, it's going to be more efficient, more productive. It's going to happen faster. It's going to be more natural than in a different time of year, which is why we're discussing this now. So 5 different applications for this general concept. You don't have to take any of my applications. You could totally take your own, and hopefully you'll all have great applications to add. These are just different ways to take this basic concept of this is what makes relationship caring and the sharing and the building and the positivity. We would like as women to make our homes beautiful and make ourselves beautiful. And when we focus on the good in our life, when we focus on the people in our life, and we focus on the good in those people in our life, this makes us more beautiful because it makes us happier people to be around. Sometimes we look at life and we just feel like blah, unhappy. We look at the people in our life and we don't feel so happy about them. Sometimes, I know the Lubavitcher says to some people that you make a ledger, like 2 columns, like the good and the challenges. And hopefully will see a lot more good. Not challenges exist. They exist for me. I assume they exist for you. But if we see how much good also exists, I could step back and say, my life is truly good. Which outweighs which? But when I'm looking, you might or might not make the ledger. It depends if you need it. For some people, it's a great idea. But in general, when you realize your life is good, and the people in your life are good, and there's so much good details in your life, and there's so much good totality in your life, you're so much happier. And happiness is like the most attractive quality a person possesses. There's nothing more attractive than a happy person. That's the type of person you want to be around. So your beautiful home, because it's filled with happiness and joy and positivity, and you're beautiful you, because you're filled with happiness and positivity. This adds so much to relationships. And we as women, we know we're really powerful. From a perspective of Jewish thought, the women are the redeemers of the world. Our sages said that in the merit of the righteous women, 3 million Jews left Egypt. The women were so righteous, so committed to redemption, they got out, and the men got out too because of them, and the children got out too because of them. So that's where we come from, strong Jewish woman stock. And we're told, we spoke before about the energy of tonight and tomorrow is the greatest Kabbalist of all time, Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai. The second greatest Kabbalist of all time, both of these are like non-disputable. Definitely Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai was the greatest Kabbalist of all times, and definitely the second greatest Kabbalist of all time, who lived many generations later, referred to as the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal HaKadosh. And the Arizal, who's buried, Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai is buried in Meron. The Arizal is a hop and a skip away. He's buried in Tzfat, so from one to the other is like a half an hour or so. He said that the generation bringing the redemption is a reincarnation of the generation that left Egypt. So those righteous women that got us out of Egypt, they're us. We're those righteous women. So we righteous women are the redeemers. Redeemers meaning God wants this world to be his home. And women are really good at that. A man could build a house, but a woman makes it a beautiful home. We have a special feeling for beauty that causes expansiveness. When you're in a beautiful environment, your powers expand. You're comfortable to expose yourself. That's a home. This world being God's home means a permanent revelation of God's essence. So in a made by women home, because our sense of beauty that we infuse in serving God makes this world a place where God is free to expand and expose himself. So when you're a happier person, you're changing the energy of your home. You're making it a happy home where everyone in it wants to be there, where people feel expansive. As we're saying, God will feel expansive in this world. God will be able to reveal himself because we make this world such a beautiful, happy place, a place of redemption. So when we do that inside, we're doing that in the world. Women are the ones doing it in the world, and we're the ones doing it in our home. So when we're happy, we change the energy of our home. We make it a happy home, a place where people want to be, where people feel expansive because it's a beautiful place, because it's a happy place. So this beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside home will make your husband want to be home and with his beautiful wife, and make your children want to be home with their beautiful mother, and make your relatives want to come and hang out in your beautiful home with their beautiful relative, or your friend with their beautiful friend. So this happiness, this joy, this positivity, which comes by looking at your life and seeing the good in it, really shifts the attractiveness, the whole energy of you and of your home. So that's one whole beautiful work you can do to take this concept and really try to make it practical. Another idea. Now I'm going to go on a different tangent, but with the same foundational point. How do we, taking this theme of positivity, working on ourselves, because now is the time to work on ourselves, what are we demanding from ourselves to do? What are we going to do to really improve an already good situation and make it even better? So something very specific we can do. And this is, of course, I'm talking about a husband, because I'm talking about being an even better spouse. But you can change it to, as I said, your mother, your child, your sister, your friend, your colleague, your boss. Works in all relationships. We're going to say husband here. Is focus on your husband's good. And I'm going to assume your husband has plenty of good. And almost like what Chava said last week, she said something like this: the more I focus on my husband's good and I remind myself of his good, I sort of memorize his good, I put in the bank his good. So when I might perhaps a little bit start getting annoyed with him over something, I want to go right and dive into that space of appreciating all his good. Now, in general, now that's a very good tool. And I'm saying, I think Chava said something very similar last week. But something here actually spiritually is happening very deeply when you do this very basic, but very powerful exercise. As we notice his good, and we don't allow ourselves to obsess on his bad, a lot of us do the opposite, right? But when we're doing it right, we notice the good and we don't let ourselves focus on the bad. What it really does, each time we notice the good, it strengthens that good. And each time we don't think about the bad, it shrinks the bad. This is in our power. This is a huge power. Why? Because when we are thinking about something, we actually literally energize it, which is an amazing and pretty scary power that we all have. This is actually, of course, there's this big prohibition against gossip. And maybe have heard of the concept of gossiping. You maybe even might know some people that gossip. You might even have sometimes done it yourself, because we all do, right? It's really hard for us to stop gossiping. Don't ask me why. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that you should know when you say words of gossip, or even when you think them, you are strengthening the evil you're talking about. If you talk about, oh my gosh, he's so petty, catty, selfish, dishonest, immoral, whatever words you're saying, you're literally strengthening that issue. So if you're saying good words, you're strengthening the good. And if you're more likely, if you're gossiping, saying bad words, you're strengthening that bad. It doesn't only happen when you say it, it also happens when you think it. If you think in your mind, he's so dishonest, he's so dishonest, he's so dishonest, you strengthen the dishonesty. It's really scary. Something happened to me recently with someone, and I really felt that's what happened, like really intently. It's scary and true. And if you think he's so honest, he's so kind, he's so generous, that's what gets strengthened in the other person. So when I'm noticing the bad in the spouse, it's strengthening those weaknesses, which means I'm hurting him, my husband, and I'm hurting myself because it's my husband, and I'm hurting the marriage because we're in this together. So when I instead shift my brain and focus on very narrow focus, the good, his good, I know is good, and I remind myself of his good, and I remind myself of his good. Maybe some days I might notice new good qualities. I could, maybe not. You've been married so long, you know what his good is. Just keep reminding yourself. I'm strengthening. I'm making that good stronger. And when I don't allow myself to think of the negative, it shrinks because I'm not energizing it. Another way to slightly shift this exercise, which as you can tell, is a very, very powerful tool. Something else to do with it is focus on thinking how good he will be. Meaning you might say, well, I don't really see so much good. I mean, yeah, I could pick out some good. Yeah, not so much. I hope that's nobody's situation. Maybe it's not with your spouse, but maybe you feel that way sometimes with your child or with some other people in your life. So if that's what you're coming up with, focus on the potential. I mentioned tonight, Rabbi Akiva, right? His students stopped dying tonight. And I said he was one of the greatest sages the Jews ever had, definitely will be on that governing body, the Sanhedrin of the 71 greatest sages of the entire time. No question he's going to be on that body. And I said that he only started learning Torah when he was 40. And he was an ignorant shepherd. And what happened? This very special young girl, he was 40. I don't know how old she was, maybe 12, 13, 14. She saw him. She was the daughter, the only child of one of the wealthiest men in Israel at the time. He was a poor, ignorant shepherd, had already married. His wife had passed away. He had a child. His father was a convert. Like he was a nothing, a nobody. And she saw his potential. And in this ignorant man, some almost 30 years older than her, she saw Rabbi Akiva. And she was speaking to him and she said, you have to go learn. And he's like, learn? I can't learn. I don't know the ABCs. I don't know the Hebrew alphabet. I can't read. I can't learn. I'm ignorant. Like some people, they have more money. They have more easy life. That wasn't not his script, not his road. And Rachel said, you have to learn. She said, I will marry you if you commit yourself to learning. It's like, you'll marry me. What are you, crazy? You're young, you're beautiful, you come from noble stock, you're fabulously wealthy. You marry me, I mean, your father's going to disinherit you. You're going to be a poor, nobody woman married to nobody me. She said, I'll marry you. If you commit to learn, I'll marry you. And that's what happened. And I mean, the dramatic story goes on, and her father did disinherit her, and whatever. And he, because of her belief in him, because of her encouragement and pushing him to become who he could be, he became Rabbi Akiva. He became the greatest sage of his generation. That's the power of a woman, seeing potential and bringing it out. So Rabbi Akiva, with his 24,000 students, it's all the credit of this one Jewish girl, Rachel. That's a woman in her best. A lot of times we think of women as sort of like the nagging shrew who sees potential and keeps nagging and harassing the person who's not doing it. But to see potential and have the positivity and the joy and the belief and the confidence in it and help the other person bring it out, that's the power of positivity. That's the power of a woman. It's the power of a wife. So we're saying here a few different practical things. We're saying focus on his good. We're saying don't focus on the bad. We're saying focus on his potential. And if all of that seems like just too big and overwhelming to actually do any of it, though I hope it's not. But if you're finding it difficult to even think of that, I'm going to scale it down a little more. Select the smallest, lightest annoyance you have in this relationship, which could be in your marriage, could be in another relationship, and tell yourself, for this one issue, just for this one issue, I'm going to do this work. Meaning I'm not going to allow myself to notice this. And whenever something comes up, I'm just going to go into his goodness and focus on his goodness. I'm not processing this. I'm not focusing on it. I'm not harassing him about it. It just doesn't exist. I'm just going to shrink it out of existence because I'm not going to energize it at all. And then when you master that, go to another one. And sometimes people tell me, well, you know, that's all sounds good, but I really can't, when I'm stressed, I can't think of anything good about my husband at all, which of course isn't true. But sometimes when you're stressed, it's not a good time to start thinking about your husband's good. So in a quiet time, make a list, write it down, not literally having to memorize it, but to have it on the tip of your brain. So you could so easily retrieve it. And in any of those more stressful moments, you can just go straight there and just really naturally look at him and life that way. I'm not going to go in at length because I told you I was going to give you 5 and I gave you 2 because I spent a while with those 2. I'm going to say briefly the other 3, just to give you more ways because maybe 1 wasn't really your speed. All right, so try 2. Well, maybe 2 wasn't either. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 more. And from all these 5, I sincerely hope there's 1 you're going to say, all right, I'll try it. And if you want to try all 5, that's great. My third point in terms of just positivity and adding in good is really the most positive thing in the world, bringing God more into your relationship. The more you bring God more into your life in all the details of serving God, the more he's there and the more there's that natural, good, positive energy. I had a lot more to say about that, which I'm not going to because it's late, but I think the idea is clear. The fourth point is the idea of appreciation, being thankful, appreciative, grateful for every little thing. I'm saying he here because I'm talking about a spouse, but use whatever pronoun is appropriate. You could be thinking about another person in your world. Everything he does. It's an amazing tool, appreciation. It really shifts dynamics when we really appreciate. I think it's a very powerful thought. It says when the redemption comes, God and Mashiach, the Redeemer, are going to go to every single Jew in the world. There's 15 million of us in the world. And God and Mashiach are going to thank every single Jew for everything each person did to bring Mashiach. God's going to thank me and Bella and Rivka and Leah, every single one of us. Even though God knows, she could have done more. God's not going to focus on the more we could have done. God is going to sincerely thank us. Mashiach is going to sincerely thank us for what we did and sincerely appreciate it and sincerely be grateful for it. Because our efforts, however big or small they were, is part of what caused the complete revelation of the Redeemer, of Mashiach. I think that is such a lesson for us. We need to be like God. We need to be like Mashiach. We need to appreciate and vocally thank the other person, here I'm going to say he, your spouse, for everything he does. And it really shifts the dynamics in relationships when we sincerely are appreciative for the good. We remind ourselves and we also express it. We verbalize it. We share it with the other person. Some people don't like doing that. Some people feel it's not sincere. It should be sincere. Some feel it seems fake. No, it's not fake. It's real. It's a very powerful thing, gratitude. And it changes a lot of things. Fifth, again, I'm saying I know these a little briefly, a little quickly, but just to put out these various ideas. A fifth idea is just adding positivity in your interactions. Like, don't just do what you have to for functioning, but sweetness in your relationship. And someone asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a man, he said, I hear that Saturday night, if you fold the talit, that ritual prayer shawl, Saturday night, if you fold it in a certain way, that helps peace in the home. So should I do this as a true folding the talit, the prayer shawl, in a certain way, brings peace and harmony in the home? And the Lubavitcher is that, I don't know. But if you fold up your sleeves and wash the dishes, that will probably help bring peace in the home. I think you could say it's a cute story, but there's a very strong point the Rebbe is making. Positivity doesn't mean like you just sort of philosophize a list of nice traits the other person has. Positivity means giving gifts often, frequently, freely. Gifts without any strings attached. Gifts, even if he doesn't know you're giving him a gift, you could choose not to mention it. But you feel it. And you do it in a way that he's probably going to realize it too, consciously, or a little bit just the energy. All of those like positive gifts. Gifts means buying this in the store because you know he likes it, or making this, or if you know he cares about time, being on time, even though really you'd rather be late, or doing certain things in the house that you know he'd appreciate. Hundreds of gifts we can give our spouse. Things we wouldn't do, but we know he appreciates, and we're doing them. And we might mention it, and we might say, sometimes I say, sometimes I don't. I did this as a favor for you. It was a favor. It was a gift. And sometimes you don't have to say. But that's a way of like sort of drenching the marriage with that positivity, with the love flowing, with the happy energy of those, as the Rebbe said, every day building by caring and sharing and loving and becoming one. So those were 5 applications. I'm going to just review them very briefly because I really want that you take something in your pocket. So again, it was all based on the same concept of it's Sphira. We're working on ourselves. We're working on being these very forward-thinking, positive thinking, noticing, appreciating people. So the first idea was really the happiness. How the more we're in this positive space, the more we change ourselves and the energy of our home to be a happy person in a happy home, and how that so beautifies the marriage. The second idea, both the first and second idea I spoke for a long time. That's why the third, fourth, and fifth I had to be so quick with. But the second idea was really understanding the power of your mind. How when you think something, you strengthen it, good or bad. And then really with that basic premise, focusing on his good, not focusing on his bad, focusing on his potential, all of the different ideas I gave within that same overarching understanding that my thoughts really impact the other person's reality. Third was bringing God more in, adding the most positive, happy energy in the world, God, to your life and your marriage. The fourth was the idea of appreciation, feeling the appreciation and expressing the appreciation. And the fifth are the gifts, the free gifts, no string attached gifts that really create a lot of positive energy in a home, in a marriage, in a relationship. Pick something. You can pick all 5. You can pick one. At least pick one. And especially now when we have this whole Lag Baimer energy, there's a lot of Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yochai in the world right now. Salvation in the world, gates of heaven open in the world. So my gosh, definitely with all that, we can shift a little as well. Pick something. You're giving yourself a gift. If it's something that has to do with a relationship with a husband, you're giving your husband a gift. You're giving your marriage a gift. You're giving your kids a gift. This is a really, really, really worthwhile investment. And again, you can take all of these ideas or a lot of them. It doesn't have to be for your husband. It could be for someone else in your world. And it could also really just make things so much more positive, so much more happy, so much better for you and for the other people involved. Have a wonderful, joyous Lag BaOmer. Remember what I said in the beginning, and to try to really do some of those things, some or all, and tap into it. This is a day of salvation, creating salvation, gates of heaven open. And I hope you, I hope all of us really take advantage and tap into it and really see changes in our life and in our world because of it. Thank you so much for